So how do we classify a heat wave and what exactly is it?
Well, in the past, we used to use a specific number. The number of days over, say, 35 would qualify as a heat wave, but that's obviously not something that you can use across the country. So now what's used is a measure to see how far away from the normal both the daytime and nighttime temperatures are, and it's the critical issue of the nighttime temperatures because the body will obviously try to cool down over the darker hours, but if they're too high, the body can't cool down very much, and then if you then run into a number of days, 2-3 days of very high temperatures during the day and very high temperatures overnight, then you start to run into problems with heat exhaustion and health issues such as that. So there's not a specific number, but it's really down to how far above the average both the day and nighttime temperatures are.
So currently Sydney is in the midst of a heat wave then. We're expecting 4 consecutive days of 30 degrees.
Yeah, so again, it's how high above the temperatures the average, how high above the average the temperatures are. And for Sydney, we're looking at temperatures 13-14 degrees above average with maximums today and tomorrow of 34. The average temperature in September is around 20 degrees, so it is remarkably high. And also overnight as well, the nighttime temperature for tonight will be around 20 degrees, and that's significantly above the average as well. There is some relief in sight though. A cold front moving up during Thursday will bring some much cooler conditions, but certainly for the next couple of days, some very warm conditions indeed.
What are some historical examples of heat waves?
Well, heat waves will occur really at any time during the warmer months, obviously, but typically we see them building up ahead of a change coming through in the eastern states where we can see cold fronts arriving and bringing very strong northwesterly winds. But ahead of that, the high pressure system will sit and produce those very warm conditions. The temperatures ahead of the Melbourne fires, many bushfires will have days preceding that where the temperatures will be very high. So heat waves are fairly common, but they are very dangerous conditions. People don't really sort of take into account just how dangerous a heat wave can be. Over in the west, you can get some very hot days in South Australia. You'll get days on end of 35-40 degrees during the summer. So it's difficult to say when the last one was because really they happen every summer.
What's the impact on the environment?
Well, the main one is obviously the heat exhaustion for people, but building up to that, with this cold front moving through, for example, on Thursday, the winds will increase, and what we can see there is some extreme fire conditions with the very high temperatures and those strong winds adding to the problem. So that's a big concern for many of the authorities with these very high temperatures and the strong winds. So bushfires are a problem. You've got the heat exhaustion as well. And obviously that has an impact when you're talking about water usage and issues like that as well.
And when it comes to heat waves, are we likely to see them become or come earlier in the year as we're seeing in Sydney right now in September?
It's very unusual to see this sort of temperatures this early, but it is a sign, unfortunately, of perhaps things to come. Going back to 2019, which was the warmest year on record for Australia, that wasn't an El Nino year, so with a looming El Nino, it could well be that we'll see much higher temperatures for this summer as well. So heat waves will obviously be a feature of this summer. Whether we'll see these sorts of conditions becoming more frequent, that's very difficult to say. You have to have the right weather conditions in place. But certainly as we're tipping the balance towards warmer temperatures with the climate changing the way it is, then seeing heat waves as early as this would not be that unusual.
You said there's a looming El Nino. Do you expect the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia to declare an El Nino for this summer?
The indications for an El Nino are certainly there at the moment in terms of the sea surface temperatures out in the Pacific, and many other international weather agencies have already called that, but the Bureau is holding off a little bit because the atmosphere hasn't coupled with the ocean, as they call it. So the trade winds are not quite weakening the way that they would normally for an El Nino, but it would be very surprising if they didn't call it in the next few weeks or so.
Okay, and so what exactly are they waiting for when you said that they're waiting for the atmosphere to be coupled with the oceans? They want to see those ocean temperatures rise?
No, the ocean temperatures are actually well above what the threshold would be to call an El Nino, but the Bureau will also be looking at the way that the winds are operating in the atmosphere as well. And the trade winds that blow across the equator are not weakening in the way that they would normally. So once they start to see those trade winds weakening, then it's highly likely that the El Nino will be called, and that will bring the Bureau into line with many other international weather agencies.